Yes, we are live, Juan. Again, very, very cool that you are in my show to have a conversation about this very fascinating topic, the homunculus, and of course, alchemy. How are you, man?
Doing okay, man. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk about the homunculus.
Yeah,
I
man, I've
always
been
love talking
following
about it.
you for at least, well, I think at least a year now or something. And ever since you came up with these concepts, and also you provided a very large body of information to the channel Mind Unveiled, right?
Yeah, I did. I collabed with him on the 10-hour documentary.
Yeah, the
Yes.
10-hour documentary, and that was such a very fascinating documentary. That's unbelievable. I've been studying this documentary, which is 10 hours, for at least 100 hours, or even I think double that or something like that. It was the endless photo session of the photo presentation. Is it also all your information, or?
So what Mind Unveiled did in regards to the homunculus, he really took it, and I really love what he did with it because he took it a little bit of above and beyond. And by the way, I don't own the information. I read a lot, and I present. I like reading about history. I've always been sort of a history buff, even in during school. And
Mhm.
so what Mind Unveiled really did is he took it a step above and really thought outside the box as how the homunculus can fit into the old world model, right? Tartaria, lost civilizations, and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And he really took it above and beyond. He did a lot. I mean, that was probably 6 to 8 months in the making, that entire thing, and we were just bouncing ideas back and forth and present, and then new things would come up and more things would come up, and we'd find this text and this and that, and we tried out for the first time translating text using AI. So it was a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, and he really took it to the next level as far as like the Tartaria, Cabbage Patch Kids, and all
Yeah, and
that good
also,
stuff.
of course, the different ancient works you presented in the documentary, like the Book of the Cow or something, and things like that, which I also translated myself using AI. But that now alchemy was practiced, of course, and studied during several periods in history. But which of these periods are or were the most important or influential regarding alchemy or the homunculus?
So the dude, I mean, this topic goes back to I've seen as far back as like the second century BCE, bro. So thousands of years. But as
Yeah.
far as like the pinnacle of the homunculus, I think they all play a role into it because and what I love about the topic is that it evolves, right? It
Hmm.
goes from like a metaphysical thing to a physical thing to like more of like an amulet talisman sort of statue, right? Animating statues. You have the opening of the mouth ceremony with the ancient Egyptians. You have there's another one that the Mesopotamians also had, which was I think called it was something similar. I have the name somewhere, but it was the same idea of animating a statue and invoking a
Hmm.
deity into it, and it would prophesize. And the reason that they would use statues is because these deities, these gods, were too powerful to be observed in their real form. So they would put them in these statues, and hey, you can interact, a mere human can interact with it, this mortal animal, if you will, like a human's just a monkey. They can interact with the divine through this medium that is so like the statues were a sort of filter, if you will. And then from there it evolved into Takwin, which is the more Arabic sort of Muslim approach to the Middle Eastern approach to artificial life, and then
Hmm.
that work really sprung forth to Paracelsus 16th century from there. But if I had to guess, I mean, I'd say it was around the 8th, 9th century when the idea of artificial life was really coming
Yeah,
to
and it was
a
it
real
a
thing.
other it was they had a concept like the talking heads or something like that, huh?
The
And
teraphim, yeah.
was it really a concept of a physical talking head, or was it more like an interpretation, like an oracle or something?
What do you think, bro? That's what I always wondered
Well,
too.
now I have some very, I think, some very fascinating insights about this. Have you ever heard about the Ora Linda book?
The Oralinda, I think so. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. I
well,
mean, unless it was you who sent it to me.
yeah, well, I saw your conversations you had with Jay Widener in the past, and he also brings, of course, the very fascinating topic of the cross of Henday and things like that.
Yeah.
And this concept, of course, also speaks of a cycle, which is also and this cycle, or the information about this, was of course also sought after by Adolf Hitler. And Hitler
Wow.
and his Nazi crew also were heavily investigating their Aryan origin. And because of that, they discovered the so-called Linde book, which is an ancient Frisian manuscript. And it's a bundle of family tales spanning multiple generations, especially covering the time until around the time of Caesar, the first centuries BCE, and also the few centuries before that. And they are filled with stories and legends about this so-called Aryan heritage. And this Frisian culture also ruled or governed the earth. And they also they frequently used oracles. They were the origin of the famous oracles of the old world. And of course, these oracles are, of course, some kind of an ancient artificial intelligence, or some kind of source for magic or magic information, And I think if you particularly as an expert in the homunculus or alchemy study, I think the Linde book specifically could be very, very interesting for you as a package of information.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen like the name, unless it was somebody who commented about it in one of the comments. But yeah, this is really interesting. I love how it's considered a hoax or a forgery. Usually stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. And of
Yeah,
course,
I never heard about this though.
Now, well, I originally read only the original transcript, which was published in 1850 or something, which also included a very thorough study of the text and the paper of the Linde book in which it was presented, and that it was finally deemed as a forgery is very telling, or very odd, regarding if you consider all the studies that went on regarding the authenticity of this book, which was very proven in my opinion.
Yeah, and here's the thing that a lot of people, it's a hard pill to swallow, but in my opinion, I think that a lot of the powers that be, and by a lot of the powers that be, I'm talking about governmental entities, people in power, and in these political positions, even celebrities, they are interested in the occult. They are interested in being in the occult as far as manipulating your reality, if you will. You know what I'm saying? So these people, Nazi occultism is really interesting because it gets into that controversial territory of like, were these Aryans, were they actually aliens? Instead of Aryans, there were aliens, and it's like, were they the Anunnaki? Were they whatever?
Exactly, yeah.
And that to me, dude, you got people who don't even believe in any of this stuff. Like,
well, I thought, especially the revelation of the Anunnaki being the gods, or a race of gods in the Bible or something, or in the ancient world, is also very an eye-opener. It was also a very eye-opening concept for me to consider, because I also regard the Sumerian tablets as very credible, I guess, or at least describing a very accurate or somewhat accurate history of our world, I guess.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, what do your people believe in? What's the mythology there in Amsterdam and in
Well,
in the
that is
Netherlands?
very also very curious, of course, because my channel is now a few thousand followers, but my channel originated during the COVID period, and I had a very pretty large following on Facebook, which also all those pages were, of course, deleted, and the consensus here in Holland is we are ourselves a very awakened people, as we consider ourselves. However, this is still, of course, a very shadow band and small held group, I guess, in compared with the rest of the Netherlands. I think the main consensus or the main theme in Holland is just we believe everything which is on the news, and which does not speak, of course, about alchemy or homunculus or whatever. So we're pretty boxed in our thoughts.
You have any like folklore or local legends as far as like
Well, yeah, well, that's
fairy and
very interesting.
phase?
Well, because the Netherlands specifically has a very rich history, of course, with their VOC, or their during the 16th to 17th century. We were, of course, the the main transport hub of the world, of course, and we had the VOC was the richest company that ever existed, I believe, and we had over 80% of the world monopoly on different goods and spices and things like that. Well, so we have a very rich history regarding the Netherlands, or also a very rich occult history, because a very large body of alchemy or alchemists were also practicing these things in the Netherlands, and there was also a very large body of literature which came out during those times from the Netherlands. And especially, by the way, there is also a very large body of Dutch written literature about these topics, which has also very interesting insights. And I'm not sure if those insights are also reflected in English written works or whatever. But I could, maybe in the future, if you are interested or have something for me to translate, there is a very large body of ancient Dutch text, which could be, and I would love to translate this for you if you were interested.
Do you have any? You're not far. You're a lot closer than me to Prague. I'd love to go to Prague one day, man. Have you ever been there?
No, I've never been there, but that's also a place with a very rich alchemical or occult history, right?
But Prague, yeah, Prague, they say, was formed from the stone that fell from Lucifer's crown into the ground, and it formed a bowl, and that's where you get the moldavite from, and that's where you get the prima materia, and that's how they were able to create all these golems there, because it's literally in the ground there. So it's a very fascinating
regarding the
place.
prima materia, what do you think the prima materia really in essentially is?
I can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but I think that when it comes to alchemy, I think it's a form of technology. I think it's a form of, like, speaking of the Anunnaki, they say that a lot of that lore was put into Star Wars, like this intergalactic battle, this force that we know it's there. It's almost, and I don't want to compare the force to God, but
yeah,
kind of, right, where you're able to tap into that if you want to. That's the way I see alchemy, where there's multiple ways to skin a cat, there's multiple ways to create a homunculus, so there's multiple ways in tapping into that, and that's why there were so many different schools of alchemy. That's why there were so many different alchemists, and they all had their own paths. There's also the wet path, there's the dry path, there's Paracelsian, there's Valentinian, there's Arnaldian, there's all these different paths, and it's because they were looking to achieving the magnum opus. So as long as you were able to achieve the magnum opus, it didn't matter how, as long as you got there. And that's the beautiful thing about, even if you look at the word gnosis is what is sacred to you. Whatever that experience is to you and your process and your life. That's why I always tell people, they go, how should I make my show? Do it how you want to, because at the end of the day, it's about how you do it, and that's what makes it special, and that's what's going to launch you to the next side. Similar to alchemy, they were all doing their own things, and they were. I mean, I've heard the prima materia, everything, bro, anything under the sun. So people are like, oh, it's bodily fluids, it's this, it's the moldavite in the ground in Prague, it's XYZ. Like, there's so many different things, and I'm sure it all works. I'm sure it all works.
I had a very specific interpretation after my studies and visualizations about all of this, and I had a visualization or a realization about the aqua viscosa, which is of course mentioned by most of you as being semen or something, right? But when I was reading the text, I finally came to the conclusion that aqua viscosa could be our brain fluid, our cerebral fluid, which is of course obtained through the spinal cord, and this is a transparent fluid which also holds electrolytes, and electrolytes with it containing electrolytes, our movements as humans are the movements within the large electrolytic battery that the Earth itself is.
Yeah, and that's also reminding me of the colostrum, which is, according to Manly P. Hall, if you read the Occult Anatomy of Man, it's what, in the brain, it's this fluid, right, that goes down the chimney, and there's a part in your brain that it comes down, and you're not wrong, bro. And here's the thing with this, because you mentioned visualization, which is important in alchemical lore, because not only were these alchemists practicing alchemy the practical way and doing it with their hands, and in the lab and controlling the fire of the furnace, which is the most important part of alchemy, but they were also visualizing, because an alchemist needs to work on multiple dimensions at once. And maybe if you get the practical part down and you don't have the mental or the psychological part down, then you're never going to achieve the magnum opus. You get what I'm saying? So it's like it was a spiritual thing as well. So, and people say it's actually the religion of, it's the worship of fire, because these alchemists would spend hours and hours and hours being able to control their furnace, their fire.
Yeah.
And as long as they were able to control that and learn how to manipulate that, then they were able to like step it up to the next. So there's so many components of alchemy.
Yeah.
And dude, I mean, as you know, on the homunculus alone, there's 10 hours of material.
Yeah.
That's just homunculus, dude. That's not even, that's not touching on the philosopher's stone. That's not touching on the divine hermaphrodite. That's not touching on all the immortal alchemists, like that whole lore. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. And what do you think? What's the status of alchemy or these practices achieving a magnus opus by you or me or whatever, or maybe our governor or governors or our government? Is there something occult still going on in our society today? Of course, I think so, because our complete society is under some kind of spell or something. But what do you think?
100%. I think that this stuff is still going on. I would go as far to say, because how I mentioned earlier, the evolution of the homunculus, it went from this spiritual being, right? The Taoist did a meditation where they would do semen retention. They would, and I'm sure that it was about like in my opinion, it was like Kundalini rising, and they would birth this doppelganger out of their solar plex and like this entire thing. So it's about raising your vibrations, right? And that's in the physical aspect of it. So then once we get into like the 19th, so we have this evolution, right? Spiritual, blood and bones, 16th century. Then we got 17th, 18th century where it disappeared. 19th, 20th century, you have Crowley writing about it, and he was writing about his own version of it. And it could be a regular person, as long as the astrological alignments lined up correctly. You would invoke the deity into that fetus. That person would grow up into power or whatever and emanate that goddess or elemental or archangel, that energy into this reality. Because again, what I mentioned earlier about these statues and the way that you're able to perceive divinity, that's a sort of another way of like they grow up, and I guess they're used as a vessel, or like I call it a cosmic fleshlight, where the gods are able to feel reality in some sort of way. Because there's something to be said about that. If you look at the book of Enoch, or really any ancient scripture, that at the beginning, we talked about the Aryans. What happens with them? They come down and they start mingling with the daughters of men. Usually,
yes.
There's something about that human experience that they crave. And so Crowley writes about this in a way of invoking this deity into a regular person. And in my opinion, I think it's gotten as simple as that, to where I think that there are the people in power, a lot of them could be considered homunculi. And I'd even go as far to say that there are people being cloned in reality and put in places in power in the government. And I just did a short on RFK Jr. talking about a parasite eating his brain. Did you see that?
Well, I see a lot of shorts coming by, but I have not seen this one. But a parasite in his brain, yeah. And then
they said that there was a worm that ate part of his brain and died there. So it's like, are these people byproducts of like some failed experiments that they're getting? When a fish gets too big, I don't know if you're a fisherman, but when they get too big, they got parasites and stuff in it. So it's like, is their process not clean enough to where they're getting parasites and these brain worms, or something's going on with them? But I think that a lot of these people who are in government, who don't look normal, I mean, they're also a thousand years old.
Yeah.
They don't look normal. I mean, here in the United States, but here they just look like zombies. They're they're homunculi, bro. In my opinion,
that's also very curious for us here in the Netherlands to see, because we only, well, we usually see Biden failing or something, you know, and it's so obvious that this is completely a hoax or a completely situation which is completely controlled. But how is it possible that this obvious intelligence operation is still getting so much support in America? Like of course the vote is of
dude,
course completely rigged, but
I think that it's a manipulation of perception,
yeah.
100%. I think that things aren't what they seem, and I think that because how you're saying it's so obvious,
Hmm.
but this is the best we could do. This is what people put into power. It's obvious that it's corrupt, but I
Yeah.
don't buy into the left-right paradigm here in the
No, no,
States.
no,
I
no.
think that if you're part of that situation, I think you've been brainwashed. I think it's all fake, dude. I think it's
Yeah,
all
man.
manipulated, and I think
Yeah.
that they're selected, not elected, and that's just my personal opinion when it comes to that.
Yeah, I also came to the conclusion or to the realization that, of course, our consciousness is completely responsible for the creation of our entire physical world. And with that being a concept or a fact, then could we eventually, our personal, we as an ego, are we maybe the homunculus which is projected into this world?
That is something that has been debated since the beginning, in my opinion, of what is creating reality
Hmm.
and what is observing my reality. And that's actually one of the arguments of the Cartesian theater, where there's like a little man in my brain, which, by the way, homunculus is a medical term. So there's a little man in my brain
Yeah.
observing a screen, but then it's like, who's in that guy's head? So it goes all the way down. But if we were to follow ancient texts, and this includes ancient Mesopotamia, Egyptian, Greek, Abrahamic religions too, if we're to follow those texts, we are homunculi. We are created from inanimate matter and animated into, God usually breathes life into the dirt or whatever,
Virgin.
clay.
Yeah.
The Anunnaki, the whole story of, genetically creating this human being to take over for the dude, that screams. And let's say it's not even homunculus. Let's say it's a form of ancient cloning or ancient genetic manipulation, ancient CRISPR, if you will, like some
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
ancient technology that I believe they were able to at least replicate once or twice. Maybe let's say that they couldn't get it every single time, but let's say that the ancient Egyptians were preserving the bodies to then later reanimate them, maybe in a symbolic way or in a literal, who knows? Because we weren't there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
well, especially also the concept of more recent times, like John the Baptist or Jesus Christ, of course, which are also described being children or products from or coming out of a virgin, of a holy virgin or something. It's also
that's
it's maybe
that's
a religious
controversial.
way to for a concept like the homunculus.
Well, so that is a controversial one because there were arguments in the 15th century between there's imagine this, dude. It was the ancient form of, I guess, Reddit or 4chan or something, where these guys would write entire tomes of works dissing the other guy, like, no, your work is, so they'd go back and forth, and there was debates as to, and the Jesus put being a homunculus. Now that's blasphemous and heretical, but
Yeah, that's
the
so what.
concept goes as far back as I call it artificial messiahs. And the reason I call it that is because if you look at other messiah figures in history, they also, I think Melchizedek was born from a dead mother. I think he came forth as a fully grown man. And you
Yeah,
have the whole Osiris and
the
Set,
first Greek kings also.
the Greek, all that stuff. They were born fully formed. Again, this is history. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but there is some credible, I guess, credible sources when it comes to that, and ideas and debates of the possibility of this, how you're saying, and it's not just Jesus Christ. It's a whole bunch of different gods and messiahs that have this sort of the same similar origins. If you've ever watched the Zeitgeist movies where they
yeah,
break
yeah.
all the parallels down. Yeah. So
Well, of course,
definitely.
also the fact, of course, that there were alchemists involved in writing down the King James Bible, for example, right?
Yeah, so that's the whole thing with Francis Bacon. Some people say William Shakespeare, you got John Dee in there.
Hmm.
So if we're to follow the lore, the legend that John Dee, Edward Kelly, and William Shakespeare were all hanging around together for the missing years of Shakespeare's life,
Yeah.
he'd learn about the alchemical ways. He'd be present for these seances that they allegedly had, for 10, 12 hours a day. And he was just learning the occult lore. So if that rubbed off on the guys that were in charge of the Bible, maybe. I mean, this is the way I see it, bro. And this is the really interesting part about it all, because there is alchemy in the Bible. The alchemists saw the book of Genesis as the most important alchemical text to ever exist, because it shows how to create a what they call a munus undis, a miniature world, if you will, the philosopher's stone. And what's interesting is, if we take the text of the Bible and say that there's hidden ciphers within that text,
Hmm.
the text itself, there's hidden messages, maybe in the original 1611 version, right? The first one that they printed. There's
Yeah.
hidden messages in that, in my opinion, and then hidden messages within the story of the Bible. We're talking about a multi-layered cipher,
Yeah.
a puzzle, if you will, that's stacked on top of itself, that you need to really learn and look within the text. And this is what the Rosicrucians were doing, bro. This is what
Yeah.
Steiner was talking about entering the biblical text and interacting with that biblical world on the other side. I think that books are portals, dude.
Yeah, and
So
also, yeah, I think so too, because they're also a trigger for some kind of visualization project, but also it's also of the Jewish gematria, which is also, of course, can be applied to the Bible. The fact that such a system exists within those texts, that is also amazing, of course.
yeah, the geometric, and even mathematical and geometric, in my opinion, too, because that book that you showed me, the Aureolinda, they have kind of sort of like some lines with the letters
Yes,
and
exactly. Yeah.
the way it's drawn, and again, I mean,
And they also speak. It's of course allegedly the most ancient history, or one of the books which contains the most ancient history. And they also describe the three original mothers of the human race, which were also born from the earth itself, as from the soil or something, As,
there you
and
go.
and I visualized it as they describe it in the oral in the book, being like a kind of fungus or mold which spreads and then arises to be or to become a human or something. And this is maybe which is of course the indication that I got from the Orlinda book, is that this information was of course in those days already occulted and only available for a very specific type of ancient secret society or something. But what also but a very fascinating thing for me to realize was also this, because in the video of Mind Unveiled, they also showed a lot of ancient or medieval art and things like that, like the works of Geronimus Bosch, the Garden of Delights or something, which is a threefold piece, And I discovered that when you close this painting, it's a very peculiar image, and I also have it here. This is the image when you close this painting. It is an image of a closed world, of
Wow.
course, and this is by Hieronymus Bosch in like the 15th or 16th century or something. And this was for me very telling, because this is, of course, knowledge which was, I guess, generally accepted or known in those days. But now, of course, it's all shrouded in a mythology or something, and we should not consider this being a real mother or something.
I
Very
mean,
telling.
who knows it anymore, dude? I think that it could be flat, it could be round, it could be square, it could be whatever, it could be cube, it could be all that, but there is a lot of shenanigans going about with these governmental agencies such as NASA, where
Yeah.
who started NASA? Parsons. What was Parsons doing? Some occult stuff in the desert with L. Ron Hubbard. You know, like there's a connection there.
They're also they were of course contacting some kind of entity, right?
Yeah, they were trying to bring forth the Whore of Babylon and invoking it into he wanted to manifest this woman. So again, he took Crowley's Moonchild ritual and wanted to instantly manifest this woman, which some people say that he did, Marjorie Cameron. And she went on to even try and make other homunculi too, after Parsons had died. So,
and there was also a set of laws being passed around the 1700s, right, regarding the homunculi and all the scientists who were creating them. I guess there was a hold on something like that, right?
There was a what? I'm sorry.
They hold it. They forbid it to go on. Those
yeah. Even the Liber Vacay was also banned, and a lot of these texts. So the way that they were getting around not being burned at the stake or killed, they would. And this is how we found on one of the texts that we found for the documentary. I found it in an old medical manuscript, because what they do is they hide it. They hide it in plain sight. So here's this medical manuscript, and then hey, go to page 33, and there's the recipe to make. So it was slid in there. And if you don't know any better, you're just reading this medical book on how to conduct medical procedures, and only the initiated knew where to go because it was underground. It was forbidden to, and the guys that did practice it openly, they were practicing it. They called it, like Christian magic. It's like, oh, it's natural. It's like, God put it in nature, right? So, it's like the whole cannabis, like you take this thing that grows from the dirt, you put some water on it, and then if you just so happen to light it on fire, it does stuff. And it's like,
there's also that you mentioned cannabis, because the human body also has a so-called endocannabinoid system or so that is specifically designed to cooperate or to communicate with these cannabis properties. It's like we are born for this plant or something. Oh, and speaking of cannabis, by the way, I'm actually, of course, being around Amsterdam, we all
it's legal there, right?
Yeah, it's legal. Yeah, well, it's kind of legal. It's illegal. It's legal. It's illegal to provide to the coffee shops your product, but it's legal to sell it. So it's a bit strange here in the Netherlands, but it's a system that is in place for as long as we can remember, and they will never change it because half of our economy is based on black or occult money, I guess. So.
Really? So how do you like it there, dude? How is it living in the Netherlands? Like, is it safe? Like, how are the people? Are the people nice? Like, how is it?
Well, yeah, I compared with the United States, it's absolutely a very safe place. But it's we have a very small population, about 17 million, and those are spread, of course, about on 600 different cities and villages and things like that. So we have a pretty small country. But again, it's pretty influential according to our own beliefs, of course. But also, if you look into history, we had a pretty significant role, and of course, we have a lot of old money. So we're one of the richest countries in the world, and we also have the best plumbing systems in the world. We also have a very, again, pretty safe environment to live. However, our society is completely controlled by information. Of course, we pay a lot of taxes and things like that compared with other countries or whatever. However, if you're an international company with a lot of money, whatever, then you could consider the Netherlands as being a tax haven or something. However, for us residents, it's just as everywhere else in the world. We're being controlled to the last euro in our case. So.
Is the red light district real, dude?
Yeah, well, they're absolutely real. However, the red light district has been declining for at least the last 20 years because of all kinds of policies, and this has resulted in a loss of windows or properties of the red light district by at least 75%. So
Damn.
it's not even close to what it used to be.
Yeah, it's interesting.
With the coffee shops as well.
With the coffee shops?
Yeah, well, there was I believe 20 years ago there were about at least 1,000 coffee shops in Amsterdam alone, and they're now reduced to about 100 to 200 maybe or something, which is of course a lot, of course. But and besides that, every village in the Netherlands also has its own coffee shops. We have 2 coffee shops here in my hometown, which is just under Amsterdam. But yeah, well, but we're also there was also an idea mentioned by one of our government people here in Amsterdam or here in the Netherlands, which was from a couple of weeks ago, which talked about making cocaine even legal. So we're pretty
wow,
open-minded here.
yeah. No, I've seen the movie Deuce Bigelow. I think that where he's in Amsterdam.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And also Ocean's 12, I also believe they were in Amsterdam or something.
So like my picture of your country has been from what Hollywood has shown me, right? So that's why I'm asking you, like, how is it and all that.
You think about wooden shoes and tulips or something, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like those, yeah. And the people driving into the canals with their bikes.
Yeah, well, our biggest export product is ecstasy. So, and
really.
And that's a fact. We export more ecstasy than we do cheese, and cheese is very.
DJ Tiesto is from Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, Tiesto's from Amsterdam, and yeah, well, of course, a lot of people. In America, there are not a really large body of well-known people from the Netherlands, I guess.
I grew up on Tiesto, so that's like
a few famous actors and directors, I guess. Let's see. Femke Janssen, you know Femke Janssen? She's in the movies like, in James Bond, I believe it was as well, or something like that, or Ocean's 12 or something.
What's her name?
Femke Janssen. Famke, and then Jan, just Jansen. Femke Janssen.
Oh yeah, I've seen her. Yeah, she's been in a ton of movies. She's been in
and also well,
Taken
and a few others, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'd like to visit one day. Obviously,
yeah, sure. Well,
I'll go to Prague first.
Have you ever been to Europe, by the way?
I have not, dude. I want to.
Well, if you go, you should visit Amsterdam, because that's one of the highlights of every European trip, I guess. It's epic for its, of course, coffee shops and red light district and everything like that. But also in the Netherlands, we have a pretty cool cultural value to give to the world, I guess.
I'll stop on my way out of Prague. So
yeah, please make sure you do. Yeah, I guess Prague and all cities like that, of course, of Paris or whatever, big European cities are at least at least as interesting as Amsterdam could be. So I think for you as an American, a visit to Europe could be very interesting, I guess.
Yeah,
especially about the architecture, and then you also have to question your own architecture, which you see in America, of course, which is also from a same period or in the same style, indicating that, of course, America also has a very great lost history, I guess.
Well, if you follow what like Narco Longo, and they talk about that the U.S. or even the Florida with the Gulf of Mexico, that's the true Fertile Crescent, and that we actually, because that would go completely against the mainstream narrative and mainstream history, or there could have been multiple civilizations that sprouted forth, and a lot of these things that they're describing in these old texts could be similar places. And it's very broad, the way that a lot of these ancient texts talk. So it could have been like maybe people are reading into it like and interpreting it like, oh, this could have been here, when in actuality
I saw a clip of last week or something that talked about Washington being called Rome before in ancient days, and described as Rome with the 7 hills and things like that, and that was very interesting.
There's 7 hills in Prague too, so there's something about that.
There are even seven hills in the Netherlands, and there is also legends that speak of Enki, of the Anunnaki, eventually landing or residing in the Netherlands or in Netherlands
Really?
territory and things like that. So, and it's also a very curious history to find out about the Netherlands or about the Anunnaki in the area they spread it in those days, because they
Yeah.
were very, very influential. And I guess they're still must be around in the background or something. Or what do you think?
Dude, if I had to say, I think that it goes back to, right. So speaking of Prague, the Habsburgs, where they
Yeah,
all stayed in this bloodline, if you will. And I do think it goes back to these ancient bloodlines that could potentially be linked to the Aryans or the Anunnaki or the Merovingian, whatever you want. I think that it is something about royalty. I mean, look at in the kings and queens over in the UK or whatever, wherever it
yeah,
is that the king,
exactly. Yeah,
it all stays in the family, dude. So it would make sense
exactly.
that they
Yes, yes.
follow some bloodline. If you want to get into the, Merovingian stuff with the bloodline of Jesus Christ and the Knights Templar and that whole aspect,
Very
I think there's
interesting.
something to be said about that too. But I find myself, the more I look into this history, we do have a narrative. We do have some sort of chronological progression when it comes to mainstream history, but I think a lot of the things in there have been made up, dude. I think that a lot of it is false, is
Mhm.
fabricated. And I've been reading a lot of flamenco, so
Yeah, that's
my
very
my
interesting.
my mind is kind of messed up when it comes to that, how much
Yeah.
of it is true and how much of it has been a
Yeah,
lie.
and also in what kind of time span we're talking about? Is it the progression we have been taught? The last 2,000 years, the last 4 or 5,000 years in its totality. What do you think? How much time did we already had on this planet?
Well, I was gonna say it's interesting that the Big Bang Theory is created by the church and
Yeah,
evolution and all these things. I don't think we'll ever truly know. If I had to say, it's more than the 6,000 years that the Bible says, and I
yeah,
think that maybe hundreds of thousands of years. But how can you even grasp how
yeah,
much time that is?
yeah.
Because right now, I have kids, and in a time span of 6 years, so much has happened. Can you imagine a hundred
Yes.
million or a billion, however many years they say? It's ridiculous. There's no way we can even comprehend that amount of time. So how would you know what something looks like? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So because we have nothing to compare it to. We have nothing to compare the both to be like, okay, well, this rock is actually 100,000 years old versus this other one
Yeah.
that looks the same age, but it's only 2 years old. Something like that. It could be a misclassification a lot of times,
Yeah, well,
but
because if you dive into that, because all the classifications methods are also questionable.
flawed. They're flawed, and they're based on. There was this really interesting guy that was on Tinfoil Hat a while back, and it's based on, they use a lot of like reflecting the light in the material, but then he was getting into that the speed of light is slowing down, right? So the
Okay.
speed of light used to be quicker, and the speed of light is deteriorating. So if you think about the concept of, the speed of light is the quickest thing that there ever is. You can't even see it. So think about it slowing down and what that is doing to our dimension. Are we perceiving other things on the other side if reality is layered on top of one another? And what did it look like during biblical times, antediluvian times, whatever it
Yeah.
is, versus now? And how does that even affect the dating methods that they have? So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to consider when it comes to, and this is why I always tell people I don't have anything figured out. I am just I'm a skeptic. I'm a researcher. I'm here to just read and come up with ideas and present them and have people and have fun. Because
I'm
like if you're not
open
having
to everything
fun,
and attached to nothing.
yeah, exactly. And if
Yeah.
you're not having fun, there's no point in doing it.
And it's
So
absolutely fun and these concepts, and especially when those people in those days were thinking really much about this topic. The topic of the homunculus in the whole of alchemy, is this a big topic within alchemy?
no, if anything, the Philosopher's Stone and the elixir of life is the bigger thing in my opinion. I mean, there's been multiple researchers, very influential researchers to me at least. I don't know how big they are, or how mainstream they are, but there are people who have done a lot of research into the homunculus concept. Now, the homunculus it's interesting because it doesn't come into the 16th century. So what all these guys were, what a lot of these guys were talking about was, artificial creation of life. So humanoid type figures, these weird things that are, chimeras that were being created. And so
You think
I
those
think,
were real?
yeah, absolutely, dude. I think that those are real. Yeah. I think that's
Because
where we get.
mainstream narrative, of course, says it was not real or something, or
No, I think it was. And I think that,
yeah.
I mean, look at a liger, or look at even a donkey, right? A donkey is a sort
right,
of chimera. I think that there's boundaries, right? Like with everything else. But the thing about alchemy is, and with the homunculus, it's about exposing the and pretty much playing nature and manipulating nature, exposing nature and perverting nature, because they were going above and beyond what was allowed by the system. And I think that says a lot to alchemy, which is looked at as well as like some of the first grifters or some of the first charlatans, because there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of faking it too. But I guess you got to fake it till you make it, right? I mean, that's the whole.
But also, considering the fact there were so, despite of all the book burnings, there was still much literature available in those days, and of course, also regarding or considering the resets that have been going on since then, could it also be just a way for us that it's represented to us today as being a occult knowledge or something, or some kind of things for secret societies? But in those days, this was just common practice, maybe.
Yeah, or according to the history, if you look at it, it was openly used back then, and then when they started to hoard the knowledge, it became into this elitist sort of secret society-esque, and that's when they started to write in symbols, and only the initiates understand the symbols. So only those would be able to pass the knowledge on, and if nobody's in the secret society to pass the knowledge on, it dies off. But then it's rediscovered. So this is a cycle. So it's rediscovered, and maybe we get some fragments of the technology, and then people start to dabble into it. And dude, from alchemy, we have chemistry, dude. Because the guy, there was I forget his name, but he was a contemporary of Leibniz, Gottfried Leibniz, which is the guy who was trying to find the universal language, which essentially is what became the binary code in our computers, the ones and zeros. He had an associate who was so obsessed with finding the philosopher's stone, he accidentally created porcelain. Okay, so we have porcelain from a guy who was obsessed with alchemy, trying to recreate the magnum opus, and hours and hours in front of, because if you look at porcelain, it's almost like glass, right? So it's very fragile. So he did something to where he discovered porcelain, and that was directly from somebody dabbling in alchemy. So
it's also very telling, because we here in Holland have a very ancient practice which also involved porcelain. So that's very world famous, by the way.
Do you know any alchemists that right off the top of your head that were from the Netherlands?
Well, I was trying, before the show was started, I tried to find something about that, and there were a lot of international or famous alchemists that were studying or publishing, especially in the Netherlands, but were not from the Netherlands. So
there's five. I found five Dutch alchemists.
Cool.
You have Joost Bouwbeen, PM de Roospoor, Johann Rudolf Glauber, Benjamin Musafi, Johann Frederick Sweetster. So these are guys that were Dutch alchemists, bro.
Okay, cool. Well, I will certainly dive into those guys. But I also, Paracelsus, of course, from Switzerland, I guess, and he was also very influential in the Netherlands. But we have a lot of famous humanists of those time, which were also very influential, and were, according to my theory, were working close together with those ancient alchemists, who were, of course, also very influential people in those times in their profession, I guess, or in their society. Is it true?
You said the humanist?
Yeah. Well, the humanist. You know the humanist movement.
So the building a more human, so compassionate, so building up government, that sort of thing, like
Well,
ethics.
it was more the beginning of the Protestant movement of the Catholic Church. So it was
During the
about,
Renaissance, interested in learning what it means to be human, to be a human being, and how
yeah,
to live
yeah.
a virtuous life and participate in society. Really?
Yeah, and
Huh.
it was very influential in all, of course, in all the writings, in all the history, and we have again very famous humanists from the Netherlands, like well, I've lost his name now, but in anyway, these guys were influential throughout the whole of Europe, and especially with the mindset or the worldview that people had in those days. Also
Yeah, I see that
also of
here.
scientists, you know.
Yeah, I see that here, and also they got Neoplatonism in here. They got Epicureanism. Yeah, this is during the Renaissance, so around
Yeah.
the 14th, 15th, and 16th century. I actually haven't studied any of this, but I do know about Neoplatonism. It's very,
Well,
again, very Gnostic.
I was always fascinated by history, but because of this Homunculus documentary you've made, I've been diving into various histories ever since, and it's been a fascinating journey ever since, in which I have learned more about history than in my previous life. So it's a very fascinating journey that you especially put me on, Juan. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, well, again, it's thanks to Mind Unveiled, and that it's really gone. In my opinion, ever since he put that out, there's been a lot of things. Even Cat Williams on Joe
Yeah,
Rogan
yeah, yeah, I
mentioning
saw it, man. And
homunculus.
that was also a very telling thing because I ever heard about the homunculus from your channel and from mine and Vale, but especially hearing Cat Williams talking about it, that was also. I also I was thinking about to myself, is this very occult information finally maybe going viral, or what do
Dude,
you
I
think?
think that they're doing it. How Manly P. Hall said, the alchemist, the only thing that has changed is that the alchemist isn't in a cave anymore. He is in a white lab coat with four walls surrounding him. And dude, I saw a movie the other day, and by the other day, a couple weeks ago, called The Nun, which has Sweeney. What's this girl's name? Sweeney.
Thought?
The
Nah?
No, not Sweeney Todd. The
No, sorry.
Sydney Sweeney, the girl from
Only Sweeney
Euphoria.
I know.
So, and she did the movie The Nun, which came out. I'll tell you when it came out. The Nun, 2024. This movie came out in March, I want to say. And if you watch that movie, bro, it's called Immaculate. And let me see. Let me make sure it's this one. Yeah, it's called Immaculate. Sydney Sweeney Immaculate. It came out March something,
Cool.
March. Anyways, if you watch this movie, bro, it's homunculus. March 22nd, 2024. So it came out on 322.
Oh wow, cool. That is also amazing.
It
Yeah,
came out on 322, by the way. And watch it, bro. If you watch it,
yeah, I
it's
will.
all about the creation of a homunculus the entire time. And this one is particularly blasphemous because of what it insinuates. So, again, this is 100% in the mainstream. It's on people's minds. It's
Hmm.
on people's brains, literally and figuratively, because remember, homunculus is an actual medical term, a
Yeah,
legitimate medical term.
yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that unfortunately, I have been a person that has spread this sort of, because it's always been there, right? The
Mhm.
information has always been there, but no one's ever actually sort of
Got the
talked
point.
about it.
Yeah.
And I find it super fascinating. I think that the morbid curiosity, because the homunculus is a concept that is very possible. And by possible, I mean we know that they are artificially growing animals in false matrices. We know this. We know
Yeah,
that they can sell clone meat. We know that they can do all that stuff. You know,
yeah. And
they have to
they even portraying now human cloning and DNA manipulation in
We'll
all
clone
on all.
Tyrone with Jamie Foxx. Even dude, even think about like Slim Shady. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? What were they telling us
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
back then? And
yeah.
I was a kid, when we were watching this stuff. So
Yeah, well, especially, but you also, but also the information which Donut also brings, about all the different numbers that or dates that are also most definitely are completely controlled, and that it's like the elite is following some kind of enforced timeline or something, and which is also very fascinating to discover, and which also speaks, of course, of some kind of satanic cult. So if we are as civilians are searching for blasphemous topics on the internet, it's only because we are confronted by this satanic elite that is ruling us, I guess.
I think that they're following so it's talismanic in nature, and they're following a code because there is influence to be had from the celestial bodies. And that's the whole concept behind a talisman. It's the alignment, it's the mathematics behind that, the degrees, the rising, the falling, et cetera, the speed it's going at. And that's why they pick certain dates. And you mentioned earlier gematria. And that's why I love the Pythagoreans, because the Pythagoreans understood that nature is mathematical. Okay. And mathematics is frequencies, it's different spectrums, it's color, it's everything. You know, it's not just number like a number, but they understood that there was something deeper to reality. And again,
it's telling us, of course, that it is completely a
simulation.
It's not an accident of nature, of course. It is completely a controlled environment, I guess.
If you want to believe, you know, I don't think that we're in a simulation like a computer simulation. You know, it could be a sort of controlled environment, how you're saying, and it's very obvious that there is some intelligent design behind it.
That's
how everything needs to meet a certain criteria in order to develop into something else. So, you know, we're talking about cannabis. Well, the whole concept of the seed, the right conditions are met for it to be able to sprout, and then from there it develops into a whole thing. That's essentially what reality is. It was the conditions were perfect, and everything came forth from that. And I think that we all have the pieces of the puzzle, but we're all too busy arguing with each other and trying to, you know, say my piece is the best piece, you know. And that's the whole argument where, like, you know, there's a dark room, everyone's touching the elephant. You know, some dude's touching the elephant's balls, the other guy's touching the elephant's ear, the other guy's touching the elephant's ass, and everyone's like, yeah, this is an elephant. It's like, no, you're touching a piece of a broader thing, you know. And that's the same thing with, you can apply that to alchemy. You know, it's the same thing. You're tapping into something. How do you use it? No one knows 100% except God, because he's the one, you know.
To conclude this talk, do you believe in God I mean, not in a religious way, or more in a that you just know it is real, or know he exists, or what do you think about God as a concept?
I do believe in God. I do consider myself a Christian, although not the best one, but I do consider myself a Christian because that was my foundation.
Me too.
But I do believe that there is a higher power at play manipulating things, and I think that there is, it's intelligent design. I mean, if you look at how you're saying the golden ratio, there's a reason why people follow that, and just the way that reality is set up. And I think that it's a lot weirder, and the truth is stranger than fiction. So I think that there are multiple layers of reality that we still need to understand in order to be able to really discover, you know, what is consciousness. Let's start with consciousness. Like, what is that?
The most important thing, I guess. Yeah.
What is the soul? What is the next thing? You know, like there's so many.
I think if we really grab that concept, we also understand much more about alchemical practices in the past.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I think this is enough for us today, Juan, because I want to go to bed as well, and I also believe that you had a very long day so far. So,
oh, dude, this is great, man. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I really appreciate it as well, man. It was a fascinating. It's also a very fascinating concept, of course. And I will keep following you, and I will be studying your work as well, and with my followers and everything. So, and by the way, the people that are watching now, we are here in Holland now in the middle of the night. So normally I have a pretty significant amount of people that are watching, but there are still a few dozen people which are now viewing in the night times. And I saw everybody in the chat, but I will react to you guys later. But thank you for watching, by the way, guys. And thank you, Juan, as well, especially for you that you appeared in our show, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invite. The pleasure was all mine, dude.
Yeah, man. It was very fascinating. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, guys. Hey, everybody at home. Iedereen thuis. Een hele fijne avond. Very good night to you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
And